hello, my lovelies. It is me, EB, and we are back with another episode of Scandal Queens. This is the second episode, and we are going to keep it going, keep the momentum going with another story that you guys have not been able to get enough of, and one that I find so fascinating. You've probably guessed it by the title of the episode. That's right. We're talking Brad Pitt today. We're talking Brad Pitt. We're talking Angelina Jolie. And we're talking what's going on with the kids. Why do all of the kids hate Brad Pitt? And why have so many of them dropped his last name? I'm going to break it down in this episode. I'm going to give you my opinions. And I'm going to give you a chance to sound off as well. So if you're ready to dive in, let's get into it. You know, this story has really been crazy from the beginning, and it shook everybody up and really brought everything to the forefront again when in June of this year, 2024, Shiloh Jolie, formerly Shiloh Jolie Pitt, kind of publicly had it announced that she had dropped her dad's name. Now, if you dug into this, it was super complicated. A lot's been going on in this family for a long time, which I'm going to get into in just a minute. But essentially what had happened is Shiloh, using her own money that she was told to save up by Angelina if she wanted to do this, hired a lawyer, went to court, and had Brad's name dropped from her name on her 18th birthday. She literally had this done on her 18th birthday. So really big deal. Obviously making a statement. Papers picked it up and it went wild. It went absolutely wild. People didn't understand how a child could do that to their father. There was a lot of people who were angry at Angelina. But for me, it just brought the focus back on a relationship that's always been crazy. That's literally been crazy from the jump, because unlike some of you listening to this, I'm an elder millennial, right? Like, I was there in the early 2000s when the Brad, Angelina, Jennifer Aniston debacle took place. And, you know, I know that there's people who want to talk about Brad's older relationships, but for me, the chaos that we're seeing in the Jolie Pitt family all starts right there. It all starts right in that pivotal moment before most of these children were around. I believe Angie had Maddox already at that point, but that's where it starts. Because for those who don't know, Brad and Angelina met in 2004. I think it was 2004 when they were filming Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is this movie about them being secret agents, assassins, married, living together, who then like turn on each other and have to kill each other and fall in love and yada, yada, yada. It's kind of like a romantic action film. It's a really weird, uniquely early 2000s kind of action rom-com. But essentially, the rumor mill had been turning since the two were in that movie together. Because in 2004, while Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were filming that movie, Jennifer Aniston. While Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were filming Mr. and Mrs. Smith, he was actually still married to Jennifer Aniston. So they filmed this movie, and then very soon after, Brad and Angelina obviously are together. They get seen in Kenya. They're being very romantic. And then at the same time, right at the end of 2004, start of 2005, Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt announced their divorce. They announced their separation. They're not going to be together anymore, yada, yada, yada. So it's a firestorm, right? Because no one gets into that serious of a relationship that quickly, the way Brad and Angelina did, after a marriage without there being some overlap. So there was lots of Team Jen, Team Angie, Team Brad, you know, whatever it was. But it was really, really messy because what it looked like, what it appeared. And, you know, Jennifer Aniston gave some interviews to this effect was that Brad Pitt had essentially cheated on her with Angelina and had flunked out of that marriage to run off to a better thing. And, you know, a couple years after their divorce, Brad Pitt gave a really interesting interview. And I think it's to Vanity Fair. Let me see if I can bring it up here. But he says, like 2 years after they did this divorce, after he and Jennifer Aniston got divorced and he runs off with Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt kind of gives this terrible interview saying that it was just uninteresting. It was uninteresting. He was boring. And he was, there it is, 2011. He says of his split with Jennifer Aniston, I wasn't living an interesting life. He basically says this marriage was dull, so I ran off. to get something better. Just like a horrible, horrible statement. And right after his split with Aniston, he and Angelina end up doing a photo shoot. Also, I think for Vanity Fair, they do this like homey housewife kitschy photo shoot together. And Jennifer Aniston gives an interview and says, and this is so important, you guys, like mark this quote. This is so important to what we're going to be talking about here in just a second. Jennifer Aniston says, of all of this craziness going on around their split and this new relationship that he's got with Angelina, she says, yeah, it seems like he's missing an empathy chip. It seems like he's missing an empathy chip, which is just wow. Like, what a significant statement to make about someone. You're right? Right? All right, so now we're going to fast forward a little bit. So we've had the split. We've had the split with Jennifer Aniston. There's been the cheating rumors. We've had Jennifer Aniston say of Brad, he's missing an empathy chip. We've seen Brad and Angelina deny that they were cheating, but then also talk about them having this incredible chemistry during the movie and having these lovey-dovey things, okay? So we're fast forwarding. Brad and Angelina are together. They're not married. They are together. Through the years, from 2004 on, they end up having 6 children together. Now, one of those was Maddox, who Angelina had already adopted. The next was Zahara, who the two adopted together in 2005. And then they had Shiloh in 2006, which was their first natural born child. And then they have Pax, who they adopted together again in 2007. And then last, and again, this will be very important later, is Knox and Vivian, who are the twins, who are the only two who are still minors. And they were born in 2008. So Brad and Angelina have this big family. They purchase a winery together in France, Miraval or Miral or, whatever it's called. Huge winery. This is where they raise their children. This is their family home. And they obviously, they're Brad and Angelina, right? They've got multiple properties everywhere, but this is the main center. This is the main family home. And for years and years and years, they live there together with their 6 kids in this like bohemian, utopian life. They give all these interviews talking about how much they love each other and how perfect their family is. And everything's great. And everything is wonderful. In 2014, after being together for 10 years, Brad and Angelina finally get married. Okay, that's 2014. And everyone thinks that, well, it had a questionable beginning, but I guess they're going to go right off into the sunset. Anything but. Here comes 2016. And this is where you got to buckle up because this is where it all gets bad. In 2016 is when we have the plane incident. The plane incident. Now, this is an incident that occurred after the couple had been traveling with their kids for 2 weeks. This was a private jet, and it landed in Los Angeles during what was apparently an extremely large domestic violence dispute. Now, allegedly, Brad and Angelina got into a fight as a result of a parenting dispute. The FBI was called in to file a report, and the details that I'm about to give you now come from this FBI report, which have been released over the years. It's just a little bit comes out at a time. So here's what allegedly happened. Allegedly, Brad said of one of the children, he's dressed like a, fucking Columbine kid. Sorry, I had to say it. Sorry if you got sensitive hearing there. Brad allegedly says he's dressed like a fucking Columbine kid, which upsets Angelina. So the two of them go to the back of the plane to have a disagreement with one another. According to Angelina and the children who witnessed this, which again, my understanding is it was all 6 of their children who were there witnessing it. So you need to understand that one of those children would have been Maddox, who is an adult at this point. According to witnesses who were there, the fight between Brad and Angelina escalates while they are in the back of the plane. And during that time, allegedly, Brad grabbed Angelina by the head, shook her by the shoulders, and punched the ceiling over and over and over again. And the children obviously get alarmed. They run to the back and they're asking if everything's okay. And allegedly, Brad Pitt says, "Mommy's not okay. She's ruining this family. She's crazy." There's a further physical altercation. It's alleged that he spills beer and wine on Angelina and the kids. It's also alleged during this domestic violence incident that he choked one of the children and struck another one across the face. According to Angelina and the children, they spent the remainder of the flight kind of cowering together, hiding underneath blankets, while Brad continued to just kind of rant and rave and spill drinks on them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they land, FBI is called, and this is filed. Now, no charges are filed against him. This incident is just written down. So that's in September. It's like September 16th of 2016. By September 19th, so about 3 days after this huge alleged incident, which again was all documented by the FBI, multiple witnesses, by September 19th, Angelina files for divorce. She heads down to the court and files for divorce from Brad Pitt, citing irreconcilable differences. Again, no charges have been filed against him at this time. She hasn't publicly said anything about the incident to anyone. No one knows anything other than she's now filed for divorce. But what's going on behind the scenes is that the Department of Children and Family Services was actually involved. Okay, so although no charges were filed against Brad Pitt, there was an investigation, and the Department of Children and Family Services got involved, and they sat down with Brad and Angelina and their counsel and basically recommended an emergency family plan, an emergency family safety plan. And this was supposed to get the two on the same page regarding custody of the children, seeing the children, and keeping everybody safe in the midst of what was obviously a very big, scary incident that had scared the children, that had scared Angelina, and that was serious enough for federal bodies to get involved. So that is all in September of 2016. By 2017, we've got Brad not seeing the children. He's not seeing the children. He does not have custody of the children. Angelina gets granted full physical custody of the children in 2017, and Brad is given therapeutic visits with the children, which means he gets to see the children, sometimes under the supervision of a therapist, but always determined by a therapist. So the therapist would meet with Brad, would kind of assess where Brad was in his quote unquote healing plan, because he had agreed at this point as a part of their family safety plan that he was going to go to counseling and get help for alcoholism and whatever issues occurred on the plane. So he's got therapeutic visits. Angelina has full physical custody of the children. And what really struck me at this time is Angelina has said nothing to the media at this point. She has said nothing to the media. She's been asked multiple times. She's getting hounded. Her people are getting hounded. And all she has said is respect my family during this incredibly different time. Please respect our privacy. She said nothing. Brad Pitt goes on the offensive. Okay. And this is in 2017. He starts going on this like victim campaign. He's doing all these interviews going, oh, woe is me. Woe is me. I have destroyed my own life. But he never takes accountability for anything. He just says, oh, I've been a bad guy, but I can't see my children. And all I want is my family. Like just this really posing himself as a victim, even though sometimes paying lip service to like, I'm a bad guy. And again, the only statement we're getting out of Angelina in 2017 is my children are incredibly brave. Please respect our privacy. That's it. 2018 rolls around and Brad tries to take Angelina. He makes some claims through his counsel about child support, and Angelina fires back and she says, you know what? I've had full physical custody of these children since that incident. Let's go to court and talk about child support, Brad, because we've had an informal agreement up until now. But you know what? If that's what you want to do, you want to talk about child support, let's talk about child support, which is just, if you've ever dealt with a very toxic, controlling, abusive person, or especially like if you've been in one home with a man who does this kind of thing, you know what a chef's kiss that is for her to basically go and seek retroactive child support after he makes claims. And the whole time, again, Brad is on this kind of victim campaign for himself. So then we get to 2019. So she filed for divorce in 2016. There's all these custody woes going on, and we get to 2019 and they are still not divorced because they have so much business intertwined together, like the big winery and also the custody of the kids. So in 2019, the judge grants what's called a bifurcation. So essentially, Brad and Angelina are declared single, even though the divorce is still like in process. They're declared single while they're divorcing so that they can essentially, date other people, get married if they want to, yada, 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 yada. Just after this, in 2020, Pax makes this, he's 16 at the time, Pax makes a shocking post to his personal stories. Okay. To his personal stories, Pax posts this huge thing on Instagram about what a piece of shit Brad Pitt is. He's basically like, happy Father's Day, you disgusting human being. Your kids cower in fear anytime they see you or hear you coming. I hope you've enjoyed destroying your family, you selfish, narcissistic, again, piece of shit. It's this huge, long thing. I highly recommend you go and look it up. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but it's huge. And that's in 2020. I mean, Pax just absolutely ripped him to shreds. Now in 2021, Angelina is like, you know what? I'm sick of this. We should be divorced. I want out. And it's the winery that's causing the problem at this point. Okay. They're both equally invested in this winery, which is worth, I don't know, like 50 million something each. The winery itself is worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's 2021. And by this point, there's been so much back and forth in court, in the court of social media, in the papers, that Angelina appears to just want out. She's been relatively silent this whole time. According to Angelina's counsel in 2021, she approaches Brad Pitt and she says, you know what, Brad, here, I will sell this to you. I will sell you my portion of the winery. Just let me out. Just let me out of this. Here you go. And she offered to sell it to him for $54.5 million to get out and be done so they could close the divorce and she could move, because she also was stuck in the United States because of the custody battle. So she wanted to move. So she just wanted to sell this winery so they could be done. Brad says, no, absolutely not. Not going to buy you out for that much. So Angelina goes, again, chef's kiss. Angelina goes and sells her half of the winery to a Russian oligarch for $67 million, right? So almost 10 million more than what she offered it to Brad for. And again, that just kicks off more nastiness. The custody battle flares up again with Brad making claims and wanting to get custody access to his kids. And that's how we land in July of 2021. And you guys, this informs so much of my opinion on Brad Pitt, this next part, and also this whole travesty and what's going on with the kids. So May through July of 2021, there's a custody hearing. There's another custody hearing. Brad Pitt takes Angelina to court. He wants custody of his kids. He wants joint custody because all this time since 2016, he has not had joint custody. He's had therapeutic visits, different levels of custody, but Angelina has had full physical custody of the children. So through May, July of 2021, there's a custody hearing and Brad Pitt gets granted joint custody by the private judge that they hire. Here's the twist. Here's the twist. Brace yourself. The judge was in business with Brad Pitt's attorneys. The judge that gave Brad Pitt joint custody of the children was in financial business with Brad Pitt's attorneys and failed to disclose that fact when he took on the case and when he made that judgment. So needless to say, when Angelina found that out, she challenged it, and that joint custody that was granted ended up being disqualified because the judgment was disqualified because the judge was disqualified because the judge had ties to Brad Pitt's legal team. I mean, if that doesn't smack of some mob level corruption, and it really, again, informed me about Brad Pitt because I don't believe at any point that he didn't know about this. Because again, he's not had joint custody since 2016. He finally gets it, and the judge has shady ties to him and his legal counsel, which is not disclosed. Huge red flag. Huge. So that is where we now start seeing the children dropping off like flies, because after that, in 2021, we see Zahara goes to college in 2023, and she sits down and does an interview with Essence magazine. And she says, no, my name is Zahara Jolie. It is not Zahara Jolie Pitt. It is Zahara Jolie. And she was very proud of that. And she was very adamant of that fact. Huge red flag. Huge. And at the same time, Angelina also makes a statement because she's obviously very critical of U.S. public policy. She always has been very outspoken, and she spent a lot of time living not in the United States. But since these divorce proceedings have been going on with Brad Pitt and the custody stuff, she's had to be in the United States. And she was asked in an interview in December of 2023 about like, well, if you don't like it here, why don't you leave, essentially? And she says, oh, I plan to. I haven't been able to because legally I'm being held here. But as soon as this divorce is finalized, I'm gone. She says she's going to move to Cambodia and basically we're not going to see or hear from her anymore. And again, so telling. So telling. And that kind of brings us up to the present moment. This year so far, there have been some more physical abuse allegations. We haven't had specifics, but essentially as Brad keeps dragging Angelina into court, as he keeps refusing to give her this divorce, things are getting leaked more. We're seeing a family who is tired of the abuse and who's tired of taking the high road against someone who continues to take the low road and to almost in a way, the way Brad has positioned himself as a victim, even without saying any specifics about anything Angelina has done, but by staging himself as a victim, he stages his own children and his soon-to-be ex-wife as perpetrators in a way. And that is where I think we are now seeing the children standing up for themselves. You know, that's where I really now come into shine, right? This is where, if you've been following me on TikTok, this is where I picked the story up. And I think this is really the most important part to kind of pay attention to. If you've listened to nothing else in the episode, this is what to listen to, because as these revelations have come out about Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, there has been a horrible reaction from the public. Absolutely horrible reaction from the public. You've got one side screaming that it's parental alienation, that Angelina Jolie is this brainwashing harpy who's turned all of her children and the entire American federal legal system against Brad Pitt. And then in the other camp, very similar, very related, very near, nice big bridge between them. There's people who are like, well, this is what Angie gets because she stole someone's man. And there's this other subtle little camp in the back who basically, even though the majority of their children are legally adults who are allowed to, you know, serve in the armed forces and, you know, smoke and buy alcohol and things for themselves, there's a not tiny camp of people who think that essentially these are children who shouldn't be allowed to make any of these decisions, that they don't want Brad Pitt to be a part of their life. And it's very, very shocking because obviously a lot of it is like subtly veiled attraction for Brad Pitt. There are a lot of people who can't reconcile in their brains that a man who looks like Brad Pitt could be an abuser, even though we know from personal experience that there are a lot of men who are good looking who are abusers, right? That is a thing that happens. It happens for every gender, and you know, that's what it is. But there's just been this vehement reaction. I will address the parental alienation first. I think that's a good place to start. There is nothing in any of the research that I've done. I've spent now probably hundreds of hours reading these articles, watching these videos, watching these interviews, digging up all of these old news takes and reports and tabloids even on this whole shenanigans. I've seen nothing to prove that. I've seen Brad Pitt going to the media, setting up a narrative, and I've seen Angelina and her children stepping back and very much going, let him say whatever he wants to say. Let him say whatever he wants to say. And for me, that's very reminiscent of so many of the experiences I've had and continue to have with narcissistic people. I remember specifically as a kid, when bad stuff went down at home, or when my mom screwed up and like over punished me to where I was crossing into abuse, I remember she would try to get ahead of the story. And I can remember her basically going to people and telling them stories about me being a bad kid or a problem child, so that if I then went to that person and tried to explain what my mom did to me, they weren't going to believe her, because they were going to go, well, that's because you're just a nasty little brat who talks back and just wants things given to her, you know? So to me, I see a familiar pattern. I see a familiar pattern because it's much more common for the abuser to be loud and outspoken than it is for the abused. And I see that familiar pattern there. I don't see Angelina Jolie running to bedrooms in the middle of the night telling bad stories to her children, just like I don't see her running to the press to do that. Because, I've had people in my comments now for weeks screaming that she's the narcissist, she's covert, how could I not see it? Guys, if Angelina Jolie was that, all she would have to do is run to the papers. She could have run to the papers in 2016 and said, he hit me. He hit the children. Can you believe it? She didn't. There were people close to them that didn't even know that this happened, apparently, according to the interviews, because the family was that hush hush about it. They didn't want Brad getting slammed with a domestic abuse label in public. They didn't want the children, more of which who were still minors at the time than they are now, to be exposed to that. The media bombarding them, the media approaching them, their friends at school asking them about their dad beating them. They tried to stay quiet. And anyone who knows narcissists know that if narcissists get an opportunity to be a victim like that, in a way in which they could punish someone, because Angelina could have buried Brad. She could have turned this into an Amber Heard and Johnny Depp court scandal. And she has tried so hard to keep herself and her children out of that light, out of that media circus. She's tried to get this done as quietly and quickly as possible. And when you look at the evidence, Brad hasn't allowed that. It's constant litigation. It's constant fighting. It just feels like there's very little. And again, no, I'm not on the inside, but all the information that you get, it feels like there's very little compromise from Brad. Yes, he says he goes to counseling. He said he went to AA or whatever it is. I find that questionable, because how do you still not have joint custody after 4 years? If you're doing all of that work as a multi-millionaire A-list celebrity with the access and privilege to every skilled mental and emotional and medical health professional on the planet, I question it. And, it was if you go and read, Angelina finally gave a statement, I believe in around 2021, when she tried to sell the winery back to Brad Pitt. She said, "This is heartbreaking for me. I can't help but cry as I write this. This winery was where we brought the twins home to. This was supposed to be our forever home. And now to me, it represents the end of our family, the end of our marriage." And she basically kind of alludes to the fact that she wants to get rid of it because it's associated with alcohol, which kind of makes the association that maybe Brad chose alcohol and that this is the root of the destruction that's going on in his life and in their family. And it's hard not to see the repeating patterns in that. And it makes one question, why are people pointing at Angelina and screaming parental alienation when we have someone who the courts looked at and said, you need to go to counseling. You cannot have full custody of your children right now. We won't charge you or put you in jail, but go to counseling. You cannot have your children full time. Your children don't want to be with you full time. What's easier to believe, that person's the problem or that Angelina's the problem? Because let me tell you what is mathematically improbable, especially in America, which does not love women like Angelina. Angelina is not, she's an A-list celebrity, but if you were there in the early 2000s, she has not been popular. She's famous for being reviled. Almost. She's been a public punching bag for a long time. There's rarely good media about her, even when she's trying to do good things. So when you look at that, it is not probable that Angelina Jolie has brainwashed the Department of Children and Family Services, multiple therapists, multiple judges, multiple court systems, the FBI. It's just not possible. And all 6 of their children. It's not possible. Maybe 1 or 2 she could alienate. Yeah, absolutely. Which also, P.S. guys, parental alienation only applies to minors. And it was a term that was coined to describe what was going on with very young children, like 8-year-olds, not teenagers, not adults. Teenagers and adults can make up their own minds about things. OK, parental alienation does not apply to older children and adults. Those people are allowed to make their own decisions. And we're going to get to the whole believe the kids thing in a second. But there's no way that Angelina has parentally alienated Brad and also brainwashed the entire court system and Department of Children and Family Services. And I see no proof for it. And I've looked for it. And you guys know me. Half of the videos I make on my TikTok take down toxic, manipulative, narcissistic women. And if I saw that in Angelina Jolie, I'd be the first to slam it. But I don't see that. I've seen a highly empathetic woman who tries to spend her money and her time doing good by people, who tries to distance herself from not so good people, and who is really misunderstood a lot of the time. And she's even really tried to do right by her adopted children, making sure they still have connection to their roots and their native homes. I don't know. I see some neurodivergent patterns there, but that's a different episode. That's a different episode. Long story is, in my personal opinion, parental alienation here, it doesn't hold up. So that's really where I want to focus. That's the last big piece of the puzzle that I think is important to address if we're going to be talking about this scandal and we don't want to just be tabloid shit fodder, right? It's this element of the public who refuses to believe the children, refuses to believe these children who have gone from minors to adults saying, I have been abused and I don't want to be a part of this person's life. We've seen Brad encouraging that narrative because he keeps going to the papers talking about my babies, my kids, my babies, my kids. Most of those kids are adults who have spent now close to 2 decades witnessing patterns. Yet there are so many in the public who just want to refuse to address that. They don't want to talk about the fact that like a 21-year-old has said, this person's abusive and I don't like it. There's this huge infantilization of these children who are clearly intelligent and self-possessed and courageous and incredibly confident. And so you got to question, considering the fact that Angie has been their full-time parent for most of the time, where'd they get that from? Where'd they get that from? Because if I'm getting nasty comments hundreds of times a week from people about Shiloh changing her name, I can't imagine what Shiloh is facing. I can't imagine the kind of vitriol she gets from enraged, triggered parents who have personalized her life and acted like she doesn't have the autonomy to make a decision for herself. Even though she's old enough to now go enlist and be in the military, she apparently can't decide that a man is abusive and she doesn't want him in her life. At some point, we have to decide to believe children and to hold space for the feelings that they have about people. And I got to tell you what, celebrity children aside, if you want a world in which there are fewer children who are being sexually, mentally, physically, emotionally abused, you better start believing them at some point. You better start believing them at some point. You need to bring yourself back. Because I don't know about y'all, but I can literally remember instances being very young, like 7 to 10 years old, and having adults sit there and either lie to me bold-faced or act like I was dumb when I understood what was going on. And I may not have understood the intricacies, the nuance, but I knew when something was bad and I knew when it wasn't right. And I knew it when it didn't match what I had been told was the right thing. And that is the biggest thing for me in this story. You have 6 children who don't want anything to do with this man. What do they have to do to prove to you guys that they are capable enough, that they are honest, that they are true, that these are their decisions that they have made of their own? Like, what's it going to take? What do they need to do? At what point do you guys listen to kids? Because I've got one crowd of people in my comments on TikTok who are super mad that I questioned Anthony Kiedis dating an 18-year-old as a 60-year-old because that's an adult. An 18-year-old girl is an adult and she should be allowed to make every single decision she wants. But then when another 18-year-old girl decides that she doesn't want to be a part of a man's life, she's suddenly not an adult. So where's the line there? When are we going to start listening to children and their experiences and holding space for that instead of casting our own projections and judgments and desires over them so that they suffer. I hope at some point we change that. For me, I believe these kids, because the behavior of these children dropping Brad's name, not wanting to be around him, are the hallmarks of people, of children who have grown up in toxic and dysfunctional environments, at the very least. Now, I didn't say abusive. I said toxic and dysfunctional, at the very least. These are children who've grown up in such an uncomfortable home environment that they've gone, I'd rather not have you in my life, Dad, if that's what it takes to get peace. And leaving conversations of abuse and the FBI in 2016 to the side, that is huge. And we all also need to remember that children biologically have a craving for their parents. We literally, all of us as children, have like evolutionary elements, let's call them, within ourselves that crave our parents. We crave that safety. We crave that village. We crave that, companionship, all of the above. Our parents represent that. And biologically, there's a natural thing in us that craves it. A child has to go against their human instincts to cut a parent off. And I don't know where we've gotten this idea that children don't want their parents, because every single one of you listening to this, go back and think to your saddest moment as a child. They're the only people you wanted, was whoever that parent figure was. And it's no different for these celebrity children. They want their parents. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's kids want a father. You think they're not devastated by this? This is not angsty teen behavior. This is cycle breaking behavior. And I hope at some point that we can come to terms with that and start listening to kids when they make a stand for their peace, their happiness, and their safety. I don't know. What do you think? Where are you at? Have you looked into this? What is your opinion? Have you seen these patterns? It's a fascinating case. And again, not even for the celebrities. I hope you guys also take that away from Scandal Queens. Like, it's not about idolizing these celebrities. It's about seeing toxic patterns that we can then apply to our own lives. And certainly for those who've grown up in these like narcissistic, toxic, dysfunctional homes, you must see these patterns too. And you probably see those familiar, painful, gut-wrenching growth cycles of that kind of cycle breaking, of that pattern breaking, of that generational ending of all this trauma, of all this abuse, of all this nastiness. I got to say, I'm impressed. Overall, I'm impressed with the way Angelina's handled it. I'm impressed with the way the kids have handled it. It's an impossible situation for everyone involved. And no, we're not on the inside. We don't know these people personally, but there is so much that can be gleaned from the factual reporting of reputable journals, of reading the legal documents as they get released, of paying attention to the subtleties of interviews, like the interviews that Brad Pitt's given, of the very quiet statements given by Angelina and the kids. There's so much said in what is left unsaid. And more than anything else, I hope that you're able to take that away this episode. It's been a great episode. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated it. If you love it, if you loved this episode, if you learned something, then why not head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a quick 5-star review? I would be so grateful, and it would just help more people find the podcast and find a new way of viewing this toxic celebrity culture. For everyone else, you can follow Scandal Queens on Instagram and on TikTok. I make lots of videos on TikTok every week, and we also go live to discuss some of these celebrity behaviors, celebrity trends, and these scandals that they don't want you to know about. Let me know what you think. Head over there, head over to TikTok, head over to Instagram. Let me know your thoughts. What are you thinking? Take the polls, take the quizzes, and sound off. Let your thoughts be known. Let other people find you. Let other people kind of like help you see the patterns. Make sure you're following us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and we'll be back next week. I'll be back next week for another great episode that you are not going to want to miss. So thank you for being here. Thank you for following, for boosting us on TikTok, for boosting me on Instagram. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to keep building this with you. For everyone else, until next time, keep your heads up and keep your eyes on the stars. Bye-bye.